Hello and welcome to Train Signal. You're watching A+ Essentials Introduction to Operating Systems. This is part of Train Signal Fast Track CBT Video CompTIA A+. In this video, our overall goal is to help you understand the fundamentals of operating systems. To do this, first we're going to talk about operating system history, and then operating systems in use today, operating system terminology, file systems, directories, files, the basics of using Windows, performing common operating system tasks, and important system files. Now, before we talk about the operating system topics in this video, first we need to learn what A+ exam objectives this video covers. Specifically in this video, we're covering the A+ Essentials exam and specifically Domain 3.0, subtopic 3.1. So really we're covering 3.1, identify the fundamentals of operating systems. Specifically, we're going to talk about the difference between operating systems such as Mac OS, Windows, and Linux. We'll describe the operating system revision levels, including the graphical user interface, system requirements, application and hardware compatibility. We'll talk about the names, purposes, and characteristics of the primary operating system components, including the registry, virtual memory, and file systems. We'll learn about the features of the operating system interface, including Windows Explorer, My Computer, the control panel, command prompt, network places, taskbar, system tray, and the start menu. Then we'll talk about important operating system files like the boot INI, NTLoader, NTDetect, NTBootDD, and the registry data files. Finally, we'll talk about the concept and procedures for creating, viewing, and managing disks, directories, and files, including partitions, different types of file systems, directory structures, and navigating through the directory structure, and then creating files, file extensions, attributes, and permissions. This video on operating systems is the first in a three-part series. In the next two parts, we'll talk about installing the operating system and troubleshooting operating systems. So with that, let's get started. So first off, in our introduction to operating systems, we need to define what is an operating system. Well, an operating system is software that provides you, the user, the ability to run computer applications. That's a simple way of stating it. Basically, the operating system connects your hardware, your different devices connected to the hardware, your software, and the end user all together in one. The operating system manages your RAM, your random access memory, so it controls what's in RAM, what's brought down to your disk drive, and what's removed from RAM, swapped in and out. It manages the RAM completely. It prioritizes applications and processes on the system. So it says, this application is more important than this other application. It connects you to networks such as the internet. It manages your files and folders, of course along with your help, but it's what keeps track of those files and organizes them into folders on your hard drive. It provides you the graphical user interface. Typically, an operating system is not required to have a graphical user interface like Windows does. There are Linux variants that are only command line. The old DOS interface was only command line, and many mainframe or mini computer operating systems are only command line. But on a PC or a Macintosh system, we're used to having a graphical user interface. The operating system secures the computer's data, so it sets permissions, and it says who can access the data, and it records when that data was accessed and modified. Some examples of operating systems are Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows Server 2003 or 2000 or NT, Mac OS X, and Linux. These are all popular operating systems in use today. Now keep in mind that your applications must be compatible with your operating system. In other words, applications are compiled, they're created just for the operating system that they're going to be used on. So if you have a Linux application, you're not going to be able to just bring that over and run it inside Windows, and vice versa. Now, on the other hand, the different Windows variants are typically compatible. So if you have an application that runs on Windows Server, there's a decent chance it will run on Windows XP, and vice versa. If you have a Windows XP app, there's a decent chance it'll run on Windows Server. Of course, each of these applications has their own system requirements. There are many applications that are only compatible with Windows Server. So keep that in mind. Now let's talk about the operating system history, or the history of operating systems. Now, MS-DOS, or Microsoft DOS, made by Microsoft, was the original PC operating system, mostly written by Bill Gates, and sold on the original IBM PC. It was also called PC-DOS, and it was also sold and used to be run on IBM-compatible systems. So there was the original IBM PC, and then later came IBM-compatible systems. Later, Microsoft created Windows and did away with DOS. That's the briefest history there I can provide for PC operating systems. But let's get into it a little bit more. The original Windows was a GUI environment. What that means is that it's an application that ran on top of DOS. So the original Windows really wasn't an operating system. The difference between DOS and Windows, primarily what people think of is command line versus graphics. So let's take a look at DOS quickly. And when I say take a look at DOS, really I mean the DOS prompt that's built into Windows today, not the true DOS operating system. So if I go to Start, I go to Run, and I type in CMD. This brings up a command line prompt, and this interface right here is what DOS looks like. It gives you a C: prompt, and I can do commands here like CD \, takes me back to the root of the C drive. I can type dir. I can type version, or ver, and it tells me what version of the operating system I'm running. Now, obviously, I'm not running DOS. It tells me I'm running Microsoft Windows XP. But this is what DOS looks like. So that's my point. This is what DOS looks like, and you don't have a Windows environment at all. This is all you see is this command line interface right here. There is no graphical user interface. So when they came out with Windows, of course, it was a great allure for people who didn't want to have to sit here and type commands and know all the different commands that you might type at a DOS prompt. Most people didn't want to have to learn these types of commands. So with Windows and this graphical environment that ran on top of DOS, it made things much easier. You could have a mouse, you could point and click and do what you wanted to do without having to know all these cryptic commands. So that's just a brief look at what the command prompt looks like in Windows, which is very similar to what DOS looks like. Now, Windows 1 was released in 1985. It had tiled windows, it had mouse support and menus. Windows version 3 was released in 1992, and that was when Windows really began to take off and get popular. Windows 3 had better graphics, virtual memory, and later there was Windows for Workgroups, which was a networking version of Windows to help people share files. Now, with Windows 95, released in 1995, DOS as the underlying operating system was gone. So with Windows 95, Windows began its incarnation as a real operating system. Prior to Windows 95, Windows was just an environment that ran on top of DOS. Windows 95 offered multitasking, full 32-bit application support, and plug and play. Plug and play meant that you could connect new devices to your Windows computer, and the operating system would just recognize those. This was a revelation for Windows back with Windows 95 that you could just plug something in and it would just work without going through a lot of configuration and driver installation. Now, the Apple Mac computer system also had a GUI, a graphical user interface. In 1994, there was a lawsuit by Apple claiming that Microsoft stole certain features of its GUI from Apple. The lawsuit was eventually settled, but I recommend viewing a movie called Pirates of Silicon Valley if you're interested to learn more about this part of computer history. It's a great movie with Anthony Michael Hall of The Breakfast Club and Noah Wiley of ER, where these two characters play the competing personalities between Mac or Apple and Microsoft. Very good movie, and it shows a great part of computer history. Now, successors to Windows 95 followed, including Windows 98, Windows Me, which was the Millennium Edition or 2000, Windows NT, Windows 2000, which was broken up into Windows 2000 Workstation and Windows 2000 Server. There was Windows XP, and Windows XP today comes in at least 3 versions: XP Home, XP Professional, and XP Media Center. Now on the server side, Windows NT was the first server-centric operating system from Microsoft for servers. Prior to Windows NT Server, many people, for example, ran Novell NetWare. That was a great file and print sharing server operating system. But once Windows NT came into the picture, Microsoft just ran away with the show when it comes to server-centric operating systems. Successors to Windows NT Server followed, including Windows 2000 Server, Windows Server 2003, and soon there will be Longhorn Server. Now, the latest release of the Microsoft desktop operating system is Windows Vista, and it has a number of different versions that are available. Today, Windows Vista is released. You can go buy it in stores. Longhorn Server, on the other hand, is still in beta form. Now today, the current operating systems for the Intel/AMD PC systems are Windows XP, Vista, or Linux. To me, those are the most popular desktop operating systems for Intel or AMD. The most popular operating system for the Intel Apple Mac system is the Mac OS X operating system. An alternative, you could run Windows XP on an Intel Mac system. Today's new Macintosh systems have the Intel processor just like PCs do. So in reality, you could run Windows. It's bootable. It works up. It boots up and works. But Mac OS X is really what 99.9% of the people who buy Apple Mac systems are going to run, because Mac OS X has a lot of benefits running on Apple hardware. Mac OS X, by the way, is a variant of Linux. Now for Intel and AMD server systems, Windows Server 2003 is the most popular and common server operating system, or you could run Linux on one of these systems as well for your server operating system. And like it says here, the successor to Windows Server 2003 is codenamed Longhorn Server, currently in beta testing. Now in this video, we'll discuss the latest Windows operating system, which is XP, Vista, or Server 2003. For the A+ exam, the primary OS tested is Windows XP. So when it comes to your knowledge of operating systems for the purposes of the A+ exam, I highly recommend you spend a lot of time getting some hands-on experience with Windows XP. Now, what do I need to know about Mac OS X? Can I run it on a PC? These are some good questions. These are common questions that people ask. Mac OS X, like I said, is a variant of Linux. Can you run it on a PC? No. Mac OS X only runs on Apple hardware. Mac OS X is very stable. It's very secure. Some of the limitations are it can't run Windows software without some sort of emulator or booting Windows up on the Intel hardware. So you'll be using Mac OS applications primarily, but it's a very efficient, secure, and stable operating system. What do I need to know about Linux? Is it free? Is it difficult? Why are there so many variants? Is it more secure than Windows? Will Linux take over the OS market like some people say? Again, these are all great questions when it comes to Linux. Well, let me say both for Linux and for Mac OS X, in terms of the A+ exams, there isn't much you need to know about these operating systems, just that they exist and some of the basics about these operating systems. But when it comes to working in a corporation or an IT department, it might be important to learn more about these operating systems, both Linux and Mac OS X. So Linux originally started out as a free operating system. Pieces of it were taken from the commercial Unix. And is it free today? Yes, you can download Linux for free from the internet. But what companies have done, such as Red Hat, is they've taken that free operating system, they've tested it, they've added applications, they've made it more stable, they release patches on a consistent basis, and they provide support. And for those services, they charge a fee. So that's why you do have to pay for Linux if you want to get those support and patches that some of these vendors offer, such as Red Hat. So yes, Linux can be free, or you can pay if you want to get support. Is it difficult? In my opinion, again, this is only my opinion, Linux is more intimidating and more difficult to use than Windows. It's getting easier and easier to use all the time as they add more graphical interfaces and more wizards and just a more intuitive interface to Linux. So is it difficult, more difficult than Windows today? Yes, I would say so. Why are there so many variants of Linux? That's because Linux is free and you're free to download it from the internet, modify the source code, and create your own version of Linux. So, my name's David. I could create a Linux called Dave Linux if I wanted to and offer it for free on my website for download, as long as I didn't start charging people for the actual software that I've taken from somewhere else. Is Linux more secure than Windows? In general, there are fewer viruses and worms written for Linux. Yes, this is true. But there's also fewer machines in use, so the virus writers don't write viruses for Linux as much because they know they're not going to affect as many people. And that's the goal of the virus writers, is to do as much damage as they can. So if they're going to do as much damage as they can, then they're going to write their virus or worm for Windows. So inherently, is it more secure? I don't know. That's controversial. They're both very secure operating systems, and I wouldn't choose Linux over Windows purely based on security if you're just using it for your desktop or a small business server environment. Now, will Linux take over the operating system market? I don't foresee that happening anytime soon. I know a lot of the people who are very pro-Linux will say that, but honestly, at the current rate, I don't see that happening anytime soon. Linux is a great operating system. There is a train signal video that covers Linux in great detail, and you can learn a lot about Linux from that train signal video if you're more interested, or if you have some more interest in learning about Linux. For the purposes of the A+ exam, again, we're going to focus primarily on Windows XP. Now let's talk about some operating system terminology. These are very important for the A+ exam. First off, we'll talk about the registry. The registry is a central storage for Windows configuration and application configurations. The registry is very complex. It's not for casual editing And I wouldn't recommend just going in and browsing it very often either, because you could accidentally make some change and mess up your computer. Very likely, to be honest with you. Um, the registry contains file registration extensions, and every configuration in Windows and its applications are stored in the registry. So it's very easy to go in and mess up something in the registry and your computer won't boot. So I just want to point that out to let you know how dangerous the registry is if it's not edited and taken care of properly. Now, the common program you'll use to edit the registry or browse the registry is this regedit right here. In Windows XP and beyond, there was a program previously called regedit 32. It's gone. You can still run regedit 32 in Windows XP, but it'll actually run regedit. Previously, there were two versions because regedit didn't have all the same features that regedit 32 had, so people will use both. But now regedit is the only registry editing program in Windows XP and beyond. Now, the registry is broken down into what they call hives. These hives are actually files on disk, and here's the files right here: System, Software, Security, and SAM, and they're located in this directory, C:\Windows system32/config. Let me go take a look in that directory. If I go to my computer, C:, I go to Windows, and we said system32. Let's see right here, and then into config. And so you see right here, here's SAM, security, software, and there's default. There it is. So those are our different hives for the Windows registry. You don't want to go in and try to open these or mess with them or anything like that. That's your real registry that's loaded when the Windows boots up. But I just wanted you to actually see the files on disk and have some idea of where they're really located. All right, now when you run the regedit program, you'll see that the registry is broken down into keys. These are the keys right here: HKey class is root, HKey current user, HKey local machine, HKey users, and HKey current config. So with that, let's go run this regedit program so you can see what the keys look like and what the registry looks like. To do this, I'm going to go down here to Start. I'm going to click on Run, and I'm going to type in regedit. This brings up our registry. If I collapse this, you can see here's the different keys right here. And then what you can do is you can expand these keys out. And under each key, you'll find different configurations for different purposes. You can also go in and you can do searches. You can do a find to find certain values. So let's just take an example here. Let's go into HKey current user software. And here's all the different software that might be installed on a typical computer. If I go into Microsoft, and then I scroll down and I find, let's say, Windows. And then I go into the current version. You can see how this tree just keeps getting bigger and bigger and expands out more and more. I can go into Run and Run once. This run right here, these are typically things that start up automatically when Windows starts. A lot of times viruses or worms will put themselves in this key. That's the reason I browse down to it just out of habit. This is where they'll put an entry to start up that virus or worm when Windows starts. So over here, these are values. So if I click on this entry here, this is one of the values. You can see here's a path. So in this case, it looks very easy to edit. However, if I go and I open up one of these other values, let's find a more complex looking value. Right here, for example, you know, this has a hexadecimal value of 3. Well, you would have to be very knowledgeable to know what the possible combinations of this value are, and you'd have to know exactly what you were doing before you change that. So These are just some examples of things that are in the registry, what the registry looks like, what the regedit program looks like, and the basics of how to use it. So I'm going to close this out and we'll go back to our slides. All right, so we talked about the regedit program. We talked about the different keys. We found the hives on the hard drive. And now let's talk about the last known good configuration. When you boot up your Windows system, you can press F8 to restore the registry to the last known good configuration. The last known good configuration is just the last time that the Windows system successfully booted. So when this happens, Windows makes a backup copy in the repair directory of the last time that the system booted. And when you go to reboot, if your system won't successfully boot, you can press F8 and go back to the last known good configuration. So that's used to restore the registry. Windows also has another feature called Automatic System Recovery, or ASR. That can be used to restore the registry from a backup, some sort of backup file. So let's go take a look at this ASR just very briefly, because later in the video series we're going to be covering ASR more in depth. To do this, I'm going to go to Start, to Programs, Accessories, to System Tools, and then here's the backup program. And here you can do a backup, you can do a restore, or you can perform ASR, the Automated System Recovery Wizard. It says the ASR Preparation Wizard helps you create a two-part backup of your system, a floppy disk that has your system settings, and other media that contains a backup of your local system partition. So if I click on this, this goes through the wizard, and it asks for the name of my backup file, and so on and so forth. We're going to go into more detail on this in a future video. So basically, I just wanted to show you the backup utility, that this is backup, restore, and the ASR, and it's found in Start, Programs, Accessories, System Tools, and then to Backups. So I'm going to close that out. All right, so we talked about ASR, and we talked about the last known good configuration. That's where you press F8 when the system's booting. Now let's talk about virtual memory. Now, virtual memory is not real physical memory on your computer, but it's very important to your operating system. It's used to store data that was in physical memory, but hasn't been used recently. And many people also call virtual memory swap. That's what it's called on Unix or Linux. It's also called the paging file. And when things are sent out to virtual memory or sent out to swap, people say that they're paged out. And when they're brought back in from virtual memory, that's called paged in. Now, usually in Windows XP, virtual memory settings are automatic. You just take the defaults, you don't have to do anything. Virtual memory management is automatic. But you can go in and you can manually tweak your virtual memory settings. Now, virtual memory is not as good as physical RAM. If it was, people wouldn't be upgrading their physical RAM, they'd just be using the virtual RAM. So virtual memory is not as good as physical RAM, and the reason for that is that it's slower. Virtual memory is actually a file on your hard drive, and things that are in RAM are sent to that file on the hard drive. Well, when that happens, it slows things down. And when those things have to be brought back in, again, you notice slowness. You'll see the hard drive light flashing, and you'll see those things coming back in, and whatever application you clicked on will slowly come back up. So virtual memory is used when you don't have enough physical RAM, or when things have just been in RAM for a long time and they aren't being used. So an example would be, say I start up 10 copies of Internet Explorer, and I'm surfing the web on all these different copies of Internet Explorer. But say 9 of them I don't use for a long time. I just stay on one for a long time, and I go and I open up some big Adobe Acrobat files, and I download some some big executable programs. Well, all those things that I'm doing are taking up more and more RAM when these other 9 Internet Explorers aren't being used. So chances are Windows is going to start swapping those out to my virtual memory file, to my page file or my swap file. And then later I go and I click on one of those Internet Explorers that hasn't been used in a while. You'll see a delay in the screen as it comes up, and you'll see the hard drive light flashing for a second or two. And depending on how much RAM you have and how much has been swapped out, you might not notice anything. On the other hand, you might notice a significant slowdown if you don't have a lot of RAM. So that's just an example of virtual memory. Virtual memory in Windows is a hidden file on your C drive, and well, that's where it's located by default, I should say. So let's go take a look at this file. I'm going to show you where it is, and then also we'll see how we change our virtual memory settings. So if I minimize this, I'm going to go to my computer, I'm going to go to my C drive, and if I scroll down, there's this file here called page file. And notice how the icon for page file is sort of grayed out as compared to this logo here. This logo is bright, this logo is grayed out. These here are grayed out, this one's bright, grayed out, bright. The grayed out logos are, or the grayed out icons, I mean, are hidden files. And the only reason I can view hidden files is because I've gone up here to view, or excuse me, I've gone to tools. I've gone to tools, folder options, and then inside the view tab, I have checked show hidden files and folders. This is not the default. The default is to do not show hidden files and folders. If I click on that, notice all those gray files are gone. So that's how you view hidden files, and I like to leave that on because I feel like I'm not going to damage any system files intentionally. I know that for a regular user, I would probably leave it at the default to hide those hidden files because those hidden files are usually important system files, and you don't want people to see those. But for the purposes of more advanced technical users like ourselves, I would show hidden files and folders, and that way you can see all the files that are in the directory, including the page file. So you see that the page file, it says, is a system file, and it's 1.5 gigabytes in my case. The page file size is going to change based on the automatic settings of Windows. Based on how much physical RAM you have, Windows will adjust the page file as needed. So my page file is 1.5 gigabytes. If I close this out, if I go to my computer and right-click, and I click on Properties, and I go into Advanced, and I click on Performance Settings right here, notice it says Virtual Memory. The Advanced Settings, Advanced tab, right here, here's Virtual Memory. And it says virtual memory is a paging file in an area on the hard disk that Windows uses as if it were RAM. My total paging size for all drives is 1.5 gigabytes. And I'm going to click Change. And here I can create a custom size. I can say that it's managed by the system, which is the default right there. That's managed by the system. My custom size has been modified by me. So I recommend just leaving it on the system managed size unless you have some reason to change it otherwise. So I'm just going to say cancel, cancel, and cancel. And let's go back to our slides. All right, so we learned about virtual memory, the basics, that it's used, it's a file on disk, and it's used when there's not enough RAM or when things have been just stagnant in RAM for some time. The operating system will move those things that haven't been used for a while out to the paging file to free up more RAM so that when you do open up some new program, there's RAM available to open up the new program. Now, next up is file system. Windows has its own file system and structure, which is really taken from DOS. but it's been enhanced, significantly. Each file system is a partition on the disk, and the partition is formatted with the type of file system. So there's different types of file systems, such as NTFS, FAT, and FAT32. Now the operating system, or the system files, are created when it's installed, and then the user data is added later. So what I mean by that is when you go to install Windows, and that's what we'll be doing in the next video, is you format your hard drive with a particular operating system. One of these right here. That's one of the questions Windows will ask you. What kind of file system do you want to format your hard drive with when you install your operating system? Either NTFS, FAT, or FAT32 are the common Windows file systems. Once the hard drive is formatted, Windows copies the operating system files into that hard drive, that new partition, and then Windows reboots, and then you can access Windows, and then you as the user can add your data. So let me show you an example of a file system. If I close this out and open up my computer, you can see here, here's my C drive, and if I right click on that and go into Properties, notice it says File System is NTFS. So my hard drive has been formatted with the NTFS file system. And really NTFS is the best file system you can use for Windows today. FAT and FAT32 were older file systems used in DOS and like Windows 95 and 98. And I wouldn't recommend using them really for anything today. NTFS is really the file system when it comes to Windows Server and Windows XP and Windows Vista. If I close this out, say I right click on this and I say I want to format this external USB hard drive I have. It asks me here for the file system. So that's where you would choose. Now by default I only have NTFS. In different versions of Windows you might have other file systems like FAT and FAT32. But in this case I have NTFS as my only choice. So I would click Start. That would wipe out that entire hard drive and reformat it with the new file system, NTFS. So just an example of how you would format either say a floppy, a USB key, or an external hard drive. Now when you install Windows, it's going to ask you what kind of file system you want, and that's where you choose your file system for your C drive, where the operating system is installed. Of course, I can't format my C drive because I'm using it. That's where I booted my operating system. The C drive is where my entire operating system is working right now, and it won't let me format it, and that's a good thing. That's a smart thing. You don't want to format your C drive while it's in use. All right, so we touched on file systems. Hopefully you understand now the file system is the type of file structure located on your hard drive that's used to store your files by the operating system. And when you format a drive, a partition is just a piece of a drive. So I could take a 100 gigabyte hard drive and I could put two 50 gigabyte partitions on it, or I could put one 100 gigabyte partition on the whole hard drive. So just examples of file systems and how they can be used in the different types of file systems. All right, let's move on now to some more operating system terminology. First off, Windows Explorer. Windows Explorer is used to browse files on the disk, copy, move, search for files, etc. So let me show you Windows Explorer. That's the easiest way to understand it. If I go to my computer, this is Windows Explorer. This interface right here is Windows Explorer. So you have your hard drives, you have your folders and files down in this area. Typically you have your system tasks over here, or other places you can go, but this is all customizable. What you see over here is customizable, or you don't have to see anything over here at all. So if I click on C drive, here I have my files that are on my C drive. If I right click on one of these, I can do different things. I can open this file, cut it, copy it, delete it, rename it, go into the properties for the file. I can find out when the file was created, modified, last accessed. I can set this file to be read-only or hidden. I can go in and I can set permissions so that only a certain person can access that file or read it or modify it or write it. All these things are part of Windows Explorer. I can search for files here. I can search for documents, let's say. I can type in the name of the document. I can have different views of the files and folders here. So I can change my view up here. I can view this with as thumbnails. So if there's graphics in these folders or files, it'll show me these graphics. So notice here's a graphic, here's some graphics. It shows me what the graphics look like. There's a graphic. If they're just regular files, it just shows me an icon that represents that file. I can do tiles. Tiles are just kind of these big icons. And usually tiles are the default. I can do icons like this. I can do a list, just lists out the files. And my favorite is the detailed view. So here I get the folder or the file, I get the size, I get the type of file, and I get the date it was last modified. And the cool thing you can do here is you can sort any of these columns either ascending or descending. So I can click here on date modified, and it will show me the oldest file. If I click again, it'll show me the newest file. So if I scroll back over here, and I can shrink these so it'll fit better, and here I can do that again. Oldest file, newest file on top. I can sort by size. So what's the smallest file is this one, IO. And what's the largest file? Well, it's Hyper file, which is 2 gig, and Page file, which is 1.5 gig. I can sort by name, ascending or descending. So these are all very powerful features that you can use to quickly find the files and folders you need in the sizes of the file you're looking for, the date range of the file you're looking for. Here I can go up a folder. If I click, I can go down a folder. And then I can go back up a folder. Notice how that works. Down a folder, keep going down, and then back up folders. And notice here in the address bar, it keeps showing me the directory or the folder that I'm in. Something else you can do is you can go down folders, and then you can click back. So think of this back as kind of like Internet Explorer. So it's not necessarily back up the folder tree. It could just be the last folder. It is the last folder that you accessed. So here I could manually type in some path. Notice how it automatically suggests folders for me. And then if I click back, instead of taking me up the folder tree one folder, it's going to take me to the folder that I was in before. So it's like a history. And if you click here, here's my history of folders that I've been to. If you click in the white space here, you can do different things. You can create a new folder or a new document. You can change your view. You can look at properties, other things like that. Across the top here, changing your folder options is a great way to customize your interface. So notice here it says show common task in folders. Over here on the left, that's what this is. This is your common tasks. I can use Windows Classic View and get rid of those common tasks. I can choose to browse new folders in a new window or in the same window. If I go into View, first thing I do on a new PC is I go in and I change the folder view, and then I apply it to all folders. So I go in and I say display the contents of system folders. I check that, which is not on by default. I check this, display the full path in the address bar. That's this up here. This is the full path, instead of just whatever the current directory is. I check this, display the full path in the title bar. That's this up here. This is the title bar. That's not on by default either. I change it to show hidden files and folders because I want to see all the files. Some people might change hide extensions for known file types. What this does is, say you have a .doc file, it doesn't show you the .doc extension. It hides that extension from you. I go in and I uncheck this. Hide protected operating system files. When I uncheck that, it shows me all the operating system files. It says, are you sure you want to display these? You know, deleting or editing operating system files can make the computer inoperable. I say yes because I want to see all the folders and files. Now, I don't recommend doing that on an end user's computer, but it's great to do on a more technical person's computer, such as you or I. Let's see, we scroll down. There's some other settings here that you may or may not want to turn on. And when I'm done, I apply these changes, and then I apply these to all folders. So that way, I don't have to go in and I make these changes on every folder. It's going to apply these to every folder that I go and visit. So it says, are you sure? I'm going to say yes, and I'll say OK. So in Windows Explorer here, you know, you have other options. You can do new from the file menu. You can select all. You can right click here and you can copy these. You could paste them somewhere else. You could perform common tasks over here like delete these or email these. A lot of different options you can do. If you right click here, you can send to a certain place, like send to a folder or a mail recipient. Compress this file. And by the way, these files are blue because they're compressed files. And that's a default setting to compress some common system files in Windows Explorer. So that's Windows Explorer. I'm going to close this out. Let's go back to our slides. I highly recommend learning to use Windows Explorer. And make sure that you know that it's very different from Internet Explorer. Windows Explorer is called Explorer.exe. Let's double check that. If I open this up and then I right click down here on my taskbar and I go to Task Manager, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in a second. And if I sort these by image name, here's my Windows Explorer. See, it's called Explorer.exe. Internet Explorer is called iExplore with no R on the end. So this is an Explorer. Internet Explorer is iExplore. Very different. So let's close that out. Close that out. All right, so we talked about Windows Explorer. Next, let's talk about icons. Icons are graphics that represent applications, documents, or shortcuts. So if I go back here to my computer, go to my C drive, these little things right here on the left, these are icons. For example, this document, the icon on that looks like a little notepad, and that's because it's a text document, and text documents are linked to the Notepad application. So that's why that icon looks like a little notepad. Up here, this is a bitmap image, and its icon looks like a little palette with a paintbrush. So how it works is the icons are based on the file types, the type of file that is created, and then those file types are also linked to applications. So certain applications open certain file types. So if I open up this banner 1, it opens it up in Windows Picture and Fax Viewer. That's because it's a bitmap image. If I go down and I open this firewall, it opens this text file up inside Notepad. That's because this is a text document. So based on the type of the file determines the type of the icon and also the application that will be opened when the file is opened. So let's close that and go back. Okay, so we talk about icons, just little graphics that represent your applications, documents, or shortcuts. And icons could even be inside applications. For example, up here you see this little navigate to the parent folder. It's a folder with an arrow. Over here you see an arrow um, pointing to the right. If you click on that, it starts a find program. So the icons could be really anywhere inside Windows. Down here, these are icons. This little N for Notepad starts up Notepad 2003. This little clock starts up Microsoft Outlook. The big E starts up Internet Explorer. So all just examples of icons inside Windows. How about help? How do you get help in Windows? Well, usually you press F1 or you go to the help menu. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press F1 and notice that opened the OneNote help. So it's context sensitive. Whatever application you're in, if you press F1, it's going to open up help for that application. So if I close this out, and let's say that I go and I'm just going to go and start Paint, our little graphics program. If I press F1 in here, it opens up the help for Paint. So that's a very helpful key. Get it? Helpful key. Help is F1. So if I close that out, let's go back. The other way to get help is to go up here to the help menu. Just about every Windows application has a help menu. If it's designed by Microsoft, it certainly has a help menu. Sometimes other third-party applications don't always include a help menu, or they might call it something different. But the help menu will bring you into help for the application. Notice the F1 right there. It's telling you you can also press F1. And it might show you other things like keyboard shortcuts, how to check for updates, how to activate your product, and then information about this application. Pretty much every help menu at the bottom has a about whatever application it is. So if I click on that, it tells me about the specific version that I'm using and who it's licensed to and the product key, and then I can get more info. So that's help. That's how you get help. Now, clicking. You can left click, you can right click, or you can double click. So typically clicking, when someone says click, you have to clarify with a lot of people, because a lot of people, when they say click on something, they might mean really double click. But the difference is, if you left click, you just select something. So say I click right there, I just selected that. I said I want my mouse pointer to be right there. I want my prompt to be right there. So I click on something. If I right click, it brings up a menu of choices. And then if I double click, typically that launches something. So let's go over here to Windows Explorer, because that's where it's most obvious. So if I go into my C drive, and here's my logo, little logo file here. So if I click on this, it selects it. If I click on that, it selects it again. If I right click on it, I get a menu of choices, things I can do with this file. I can delete it, rename it, I could email it to someone, I can compress it, I can open it with different applications, I could print it, preview it, edit it, all different things I can do because I right clicked on that icon. The other thing I can do is I can double click. So if I double click, it opens up the application that's linked to that. So that's the difference. Left clicking or just single click, select something. Double clicking opens something. And then there's one more type of clicking you can do, and that's like a delayed click. So say I want to rename this banner 1 right here. If I click on it and then I click again, there's a delay in between those two clicks. What happens is it gives me the option right here to rename this. So I could rename this banner 1, XYZ, whatever I want to say, but I'm just going to leave it banner 1 and press enter. So that delayed click is like a click and then a click. So it's like a double click, but with a delay between the two clicks, or a pause between the two clicks. So just another type of clicking you can perform. Alright, so we talked about clicking. Now let's talk about My Computer. My Computer is created by default. It contains disk drives, control panel, My Documents, shared documents, and other devices. My Computer may or may not be on the desktop. So if I minimize this, if I right click on My Computer, you can see there's a few different options on My Computer than there are compared to other icons like files and folders. With My Computer, there's two specific options here I want to point out to you. The first one is Manage. If I click on Manage, this brings up Computer Management. This is an excellent application for managing all different types of things on your computer. You can also access this application by going through the control panel down in the Start menu. Inside Computer Manager, you'll see things like the Event Viewer. This is system logging application. You'll see shared folders, what folders are shared to other users on the network from your computer. You'll see your local users, so who can log into your computer, what accounts are created. You could reset passwords from here. Local groups, check on performance of your computer. Device Manager shows all your devices and the status of those devices. Storage, disk defragmenter, disk management. If I go in here to services, these are services are little applications that are running on the background in your computer. So this is a very valuable application, and you can also access it through control panel, as I said. So if I close that out, if I right click on My Computer and I go to Properties, this brings up the system properties for this computer. So this tells you a lot of different things about this computer. And by the way, system properties can also be run through the control panel in the Start menu. So system properties tells you that this is Microsoft Windows XP version 2002, Service Pack 2, registered to me. Here's the CPU and amount of RAM that's on this computer. It shows me the computer name and the workgroup, and I can change that here. Shows me the hardware, and it can also take me to Device Manager, which we saw in the computer management application. Advanced settings. This is where we went in and we looked at the virtual memory. Remote control, can you access this computer remotely? Automatic updates, do you want to download patches automatically from the internet? And then system restore, we'll cover system restore later. This is a way to snapshot your computer periodically and be able to restore system settings back to how they were before. So if I close that out, and then if I just open up my computer, of course this brings up Windows Explorer. And here I can access my hard drives, my shared documents, network drives. I can go into Control Panel, and then I can view a variety of different things over here, like My Documents, Network Places, Control Panel. And like I said previously, my computer isn't always located on the desktop. The way to control whether or not my computer, My Documents, Network Places, the Recycle Bin, and Internet Explorer, the way to control whether or not those icons are located on the desktop is through the desktop properties. To access the desktop properties or display properties, you can go to Start into the control panel. You can also just right click on the desktop anywhere that you're not clicking on an icon and go into Properties. If I go into Desktop Properties right here and I say Customize Desktop, here I can control whether or not I want my computer, my documents, my network places, or Internet Explorer to display on the desktop. I can even change icons for these different applications through this interface. I can run the desktop cleanup wizard, which will try to clean up old icons. And inside the display properties, you can control themes for this computer. So this is the default theme that I've just modified the background. But you can download a lot of themes online, and you can change all these icons into, cartoon characters and have special sounds or, things from your favorite TV show. Whatever it is you want the theme for your computer to be, you can download that, or you can create your own. Here's where you control your screensaver and the appearance of the different windows, and then the resolution of your screen. So now let's go back to our checklist here of operating system terms, we talked about My Computer, created by default, contains your disk drives, control panel, My Documents, shared documents, and other devices. Now let's talk about the control panel. I've already mentioned control panel a lot, but let me show you exactly where it is and what it does. Basically, it's a single place to go to for all Windows configurations. So to access the control panel, I typically go to Start, Settings, and into the control panel. If I click here, this expands out to this expanded list. Now, this can be controlled. Sometimes you don't get this expanded list, and you have to just click on the control panel right here. So if I double click on that control panel, this brings me up to this view of the control panel. Now inside control panel, this is where you control everything that you want to customize on your computer. And different applications will add different add-ins here to the control panel. For example, here I have this add-in called Nero Burn Rights. This is not installed by default. This is only something that appeared after I installed Nero, which is a CD, DVD burning software. Here's another one, QuickTime. QuickTime only appears in here after you install QuickTime on your computer. Here's a WLAN settings. That's not normally there either. That was after I installed a wireless driver. All of these other settings in here are installed by default. So for example, the administrative tools, if I go into here, this brings up a list of applications I can run as an administrator, including the computer management application we already looked at. If I go back, let's see, here I can go in and configure automatic updates to download patches from the internet automatically. I can set the date and time. I can go into the display settings. If I double click on that, that brings up the same display properties that I showed you just a second ago. There's folder options. Folder options is the same as going up here, let's see, right here to tools, then folder options. They both bring up this same window right here, this folder options. Fonts, game controllers, internet options. If I open this, these are the same properties that you will find if you go into Internet Explorer and then do properties. Java settings. Oh, this was installed after I installed Java. So this controls the Java add-in for the internet. Keyboard, my email properties, mouse. Here's where I can go in and control the double-click speed of my mouse, the speed that the arrow moves, the type of mouse I have, the size of the pointer and what it looks like, the pointer speed, a lot of different things inside the mouse settings. Network connections, phone and modem options, portable media devices, power options, printers and faxes. Here's where I go in and I control what printers I have on my system, and I can add new printers. If I click back, scroll down some more, scanners and cameras, scheduled tasks. These are jobs you want to perform on your computer when you're not there. The Windows Security Center, sounds and audio devices. This is where I set the volume for my computer. I can go in and I can control sound schemes, so I can change the sound that I want things to play when something happens. Here I can set settings for my audio recording, music playback, microphone. Here's where I set voice playback. And here's where I can control my sound and audio devices. I'll click cancel there. Speech system. If I double click on this, you see this is the same system properties I found when I looked at my computer. So two different ways to get to the same system properties. The taskbar and the start menu. If I double click on this, this is how I control my start menu, which is down here, and my taskbar, which is this long blue bar here. Now I can also access this if I click cancel and I right click on the taskbar and I go to properties, brings up the exact same window. Just another example of how in Windows there's multiple ways to do different things. So on this taskbar, this is where I control some of the things that I want to customize down here on the start menu. For example, if I say I want the clock to appear on the taskbar, see it right there, there's the example. Down here the clock would display. turn that off. I can hide inactive icons. I've got that checked right now, which does this. See how that arrow is there and that it says show hidden icons. Right now there's just one icon here. If I expand it out, you can see I have other icons there, but they're normally hidden. I can lock the taskbar. So right now I can't modify the size of this little quick launch. If I unlock the taskbar, notice these dotted lines that appear right here. And then what I can do is I can put my mouse over that and I can expand that. So I can make more room for the quick launch menu. I can make more room over here. I can do a lot of different things. I can make it taller like that. I can have a really big taskbar, move it back down. I can move this back and make it smaller here so that I have to expand out the quick launch like that. But I typically like it showing all the icons on the quick launch, and I like it locked. And I can click lock right there and it's locked, or I can go back into properties and that's where I lock it. I can choose to auto hide the taskbar. So the taskbar goes away. And then to find the taskbar, you just move your mouse down and it appears. Move your mouse up, focus on something else, and it goes away. A lot of users will turn that on and then they can't find their start menu anymore. Common problem, somebody turns it on and they can't find it, and then they say, hey, I lost my start menu. What'd you do with it? Oh, well, you turned it off. Let's turn that back on. Personally, I don't care for auto hiding the task menu. You can even take your taskbar down here and you can move it to other parts of the screen. You can move it to the left side, the top, or the right side, however you want to do it. If I unlock that, then I move it over here, I can do that. Just another way of doing things. I can put it on the top, which looks strange to some people. I can move it to the left, or I can move it back down to the bottom. If I right click here and I click lock the taskbar, it's locked again. Back here in properties, I can choose to keep the taskbar on top of other windows. If I uncheck that, this window might be on top of the taskbar, like another window. I can choose to group similar taskbar buttons together. So if I open up 5 copies of Internet Explorer, they'll just show up as one. I can show the quick launch, or I can turn that off. This area right down here is called the quick launch. If I apply that, you notice how those are gone. Those are really just little icons that are shortcuts to other applications. Let me turn that back on because I kind of like the quick launch. All right, now when it turned back on, it's not the same size it was before. So if I right click on this and I unlock the taskbar, I move this over, there we go, I can see all my icons and I relock the taskbar. If you go into Start Menu tab here, this is where you can control what the Start menu looks like. So if I click on the Start menu, notice how I have mine set to be just this short little menu. Well, that is called the classic Start menu, but that's not the default. The default is the regular Start menu, which is a kind of a 2-column menu that comes up. So that's the default. Let's set that. I'm going to click Apply there, and it'll take a second or a few seconds to build up that normal Start menu, that default Start menu. And then if I go down here to Start, you see here's my default Start menu. This is what it looks like. Here's my username. Here's some quick launch buttons, some frequent applications. I get a lot more over here, and then to access all my programs, I click on this All Programs, then I go into here. So that's the normal Start menu. I prefer the classic Start menu. I'm going to apply that, and it takes a second to make that change. Then if I go into Customize, to customize that classic Start menu, here I can add buttons, I can remove, I can go in, click Advanced. It'll actually show me a Windows Explorer view of my different programs, and I can customize what I want to appear on here. I could delete these, I could add more shortcuts, add more folders. If I close that out, let's go back here. I can resort the programs in the I can resort this list right here of programs to alphabetical order. I can choose to clear my recent recently used documents. In this list right here, these are my recently used documents. I can choose to clear those. And then there's some more advanced settings down here, like maybe I want to display log off on the menu. Notice how right now it says log off D Davis. I can turn that off if I want to. I can choose to display run or not. Whoops, let's go back in there. I can choose to display run or not. Here's the run menu. I can turn that off. I can choose to expand the control panel or not. Let me apply that. I'll show you what that looks like. So if I don't expand the control panel, it just looks like this. There's no expanded view over here, and so to go into control panel, I have to click on that. That brings up the control panel. We'll turn that back on. So that's what expanding means. Expanding my documents, expanding my pictures, expanding network connections, expanding printers. I can choose to show small icons in the start menu. That's what I prefer, but that's not the default. Let me show you what it looks like with larger or normal size icons. Here you see the larger icons. I can choose to use personalized menus. These are ways to just personalize, the start menu and the program list over here. So those are some different things you can do. I'm just going to click cancel, and I'm going to say cancel. So we talked about the control panel, the centralized single place to go for all Windows configurations. And as a computer admin, I'm sure you'll frequently be using Windows Control Panel, so get some experience with it. Work with it a little bit, go into each of the options in there and see what different things you can tweak using the control panel. Now let's talk about the command prompt.